Good evening, everybody. First of all, before we get started with the actual speech, there's something I want to do because when I was discussing with my colleagues on what to talk about and what should I tell you about security, and they were telling me that maybe I should talk about digitalization, maybe I should talk about this and that. And I figured I want to talk about something that you can all relate to. We have different kind of people in the audience, and this is something that matters to everybody. So, for all the people who might be playing what we call bingo in some circles, and you want to hear certain buzzwords, let me do something very quickly. If your bingo sheet happens to contain terms like artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning, digital twins, cognitivity, hybrid warfare, augmented reality, blockchain, disruptive technologies, or digitalization, now your bingo sheet has been covered because we are not talking about any of those topics today. Today we are talking about Terminator, the movie, I mean. First of all, let's do a quick show of hands, because Terminator was a movie in my youth, and I'm not that old, but it was a movie in my youth and everybody saw it. So let's do a quick show of hands. How many of you have seen the movie Terminator, the original one? Okay, this is really bad, because I was kind of hoping that you haven't seen it so the plot wouldn't be fully... I might have chosen a better movie, I guess. Okay. Let me take you to the glorious future of 1997. The funny thing with all the old movies that talk about the dystopian future is that they are always located in a time where we thought, back in the day, that the year 2000 is going to be where everything is flying, the cars are flying and so forth. And as it turns out, that's not quite the thing. So 1997 for sure is not a very sort of futuristic year for anybody here. But that is basically when the Skynet started in the movie. And the idea was that there is this thing that the US Army has created. The movie never goes too much into details on how it got created or anything like that. If there's, let's do another show of hands. How many of you are working in safety critical environments or any kind of safety critical equipment where you have to consider things like loss of life, for example? There are a few. So I guess one thing you should know by now is that when you are designing these kind of systems, the first thing you do is you figure out how to turn it off. You wouldn't want to have a robot that can shoot people and have no way to turn it off. That should be your first way of thinking. In the movie, somehow, apparently they had the most incompetent people in the US Army designing this system which has no off switch. So that's the funny part about the movie and the funny part about how this design goes. Today we know more and we understand how IoT should work. We understand how the security controls should be created, but even then it seems that this lesson is every now and then forgotten. So I want to walk you through a couple of figures first to get you an understanding of what we are talking about. What are the magnitudes of things here? Here is the number of devices that existed roughly at the moment. Now, some of you might be asking, what is this number based on? I was asking the same thing, I still don't have any idea. There are a lot of these numbers out there which state that there are so many IoT devices or this number or that number. They are all based on some kind of sketchy research done by different companies. But let's use this one because I've seen this one used quite a lot. That's already quite a few devices for every man, woman, and child out there currently in the internet. Some of them are smart TVs, telephones, what have you, all kinds of gadgets with IoT built into them. Here's another number. This is a prediction from the same sketchy people doing same kind of sketchy research, discussing what the future is going to look like. Again, I have no idea where these numbers come from, but apparently they are reputable because they are being quoted in different kind of journals. But it should give you an idea of what kind of growth we are looking at. We are going from maybe a couple of devices per person at some point to hundreds of devices per every person out there. This, when we start thinking about what does security mean for IoT, this is what I worry about. People worry often, and even in this conference, people have been asking me that what are your concerns? What do you think is the problem with IoT? This is the number I'm worried about. Because when we start thinking about it, all these devices are something where security needs to happen. And in many cases, it's not really happening. Here is a number which is equally sketchy because I just made it up. But if I hadn't mentioned that, most likely you would have thought it's true. I have no idea what the actual number is, and I don't think anybody else has any idea either. How many devices out of these billions and billions of devices out there, all the smart trash cans and whatnot, are part of botnets? And I'll come to that in a moment, what that is. It's a really good question. When we are looking into these designs, we do a lot of testing on these kind of designs, we very often find all kinds of security problems in there. And that's the scary part when you start looking into the devices out there, even if you only look at few, or you're reading something in the media and it's talking about some kind of vulnerabilities, some kind of hacks targeting different devices. These are the numbers we are thinking of. And I don't think anybody has any sort of credible numbers to put out that you could say that this is the number of devices that currently have problems in them. But this is a really important point, because this is basically exactly what I worry about. If you have the control of, let's use 10%. If you have the control of 10% of IoT devices out there, we are talking about a stupidly big group of devices. That's a lot of computing power. That's a lot of bandwidth. That's a lot of resources you can command to do different things. And this, I guess, is the problem that people don't always understand. It's not necessarily even whether you made the right choices, whether your design is properly done. It's also about what other people did, and there's a lot more other people than the people you can directly control and affect. That's the biggest danger I see, and that's the thing that keeps me awake at nights. Let me say a few words about how many of you know or have heard about the botnet called Mirai? Few hands. Okay. This was one of the, I wouldn't say first necessarily, but one of the more publicized cases of IoT botnets, where you have a malicious piece of code that is automatically and autonomously attacking devices, consumer devices, routers, things you have at home basically. And the whole idea is that once it affects one of these devices, that device starts to then spread the same malicious program to other devices, starts looking for them into the internet, and spreads all over the place. This happened a couple of years ago. It's been ongoing since. And in the first iteration, it was using really sort of simple ways, attacking devices that were really simple to breach. But the problem is that ever since that happened, there has been more and more of these cases where the same code is being used to attack more and more interesting vulnerabilities, something that requires actual technical proficiency. The original one didn't really require any, there was nothing very fancy about it, but it just demonstrates the concept that you can take over millions of devices and use them as an attacking platform against other things. So what the Mirai, for example, was used for is to do what is called a denial of service attack. So you just make a lot of requests to one place, basically exhausting any bandwidth, any processing capability, and all of a sudden your target is dead in the water. That's the scary part. The name Mirai, by the way, comes from there's two ways to think about it. I would really hesitate to think about the fact that in Japanese it means future. I really hope this is not the future we are looking for. There is a legend that the name comes from a Japanese comic, which is about children having this kind of game where they are basically trying to eliminate each other. So I don't know which one is better. You can basically decide at that point. Here's the funny thing though. If you want to, as they state, and this is an actual quote by the way, from the version control system where you can download the source code from Mirai. So if you want to become a criminal, it's now easier than ever. You can literally go there, you can download the source code, compile the stuff on your own, maybe make some modifications, throw in your own attacks, and off you go. You are now a cyber criminal, and you can take part in the global cyber warfare and whatnot. This is an actual quote from that version control. I really love the sort of dry irony. It's this sort of British humor in the sense that this is how we want to develop IoT. So we have this attacking tool that can literally mess things up really badly, and you can just deploy your payload there. So off you go, download this, have fun. This is, again, something I worry about, and don't get me wrong, sharing this kind of information is very crucial in the industry, and it's very important to have this information out there. But at the same time, this is quite easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of technical skill, and there have been several iterations of Mirai Sense, which have been deployed with different kind of attacks. So it's basically like you have a cruise missile. You just swap out the payload if you want to have a nuclear warhead. If you want to have a traditional one, you can do that. That's basically how these things work. With fairly minimal level of competence, you can do this. And denial of service attacks especially used to be something that children were very fond of doing, and I would presume they still are. So when you had somebody won you at, or beat you at a game of Counter-Strike online, so what you would do is you would get one of these platforms, you would flood the guy out of internet, and now he's unable to play the game anymore. It was very fun, and it was very entertaining and whatnot, and nobody thought of it as a crime by any means. But you can do the exact same thing with any number of websites, any number of online services. Okay. So the way I think about it is that you really have to be honest here and first of all admit that there is a problem. A lot of the IoT devices we are creating now, and there's been a lot of good discussions here. There are a lot of good discussions also in the corridors. People are explaining what kind of business models they have, what kind of ideas they have, and so forth. It's very good, and that's how it should go. Security shouldn't be the thing that is stopping you. But it's very important to identify when there is a problem, be honest about it, and start thinking, okay, how do we actually fix this? What is the way to implement a fix that makes sure that, first of all, your business is safe? That obviously should be the priority number one, making sure your business is safe. But then also we want to make sure that you are not causing problems for others. Because that's the annoying part. There's so many other people with their other devices that they have created on their own, based on their own security best practices, and there is very little you can do about this. You cannot call them and ask them to do better. You cannot ask them to hire a security person. So it's a very difficult problem to solve for sure. The question that I get asked the most, and I have so many discussions during today and yesterday, where we discuss something very similar to this. And we come to the conclusion that, okay, I agree, there's a problem. There is something we need to address. So how do we address it? What is the solution? And the funny thing is people always propose something. Everybody has a solution in mind. They are saying something like, okay, well, how about we start patching these devices? Would that work? Would that be a good solution? Or should there be some kind of secure development methodology? Should there be a law or some regulation or certification program in place which is required and mandatory for everybody? The funny thing is that the problem is, from purely technical point of view, it's not that difficult to solve. If you take the best practices from, for example, IT field, a lot of the commentators on this field have said that, well, patching is your number one problem. Patching all these devices that are out there, if only you could patch them with the latest updates, make sure that the vulnerabilities are being fixed by the vendors, that would solve the problem. And yes, to a large degree, that would solve the problem. When there's a problem identified, you deploy a fix, and that's the end of it. The problem is not so much that the technical solution isn't understood. It's not like there isn't some person out there who knows exactly how to fix these things. Like if you have one device, yes, you can fix that. The problem is very often the scale, and the problem is very often the fact that you are not in control of everything. So while you may be able to fix this for your own device, for your own business model, what have you, whatever you're responsible for, there's a lot of other stuff that you cannot really affect. You cannot just go and change the code for other people. That's the difficult part. And whenever we have these discussions at our booth, for example, people come to ask, okay, what would you do? And it's a really difficult one. It's really difficult to sell. What is the solution that would suddenly make the problem better? So you have to basically work together with the teams. First of all, create awareness within the development sites when there is new IoT products made, that they need to understand that security plays a significant role there. There needs to be an understanding that this thing actually matters. That's the only way it's going to ever get better. There's also a lot of ways to implement this more easily, a lot of solutions that take care of a lot of the problems by default. So you don't have to necessarily know a lot about security when you are using the right products, right platforms, all these things. So that's definitely one part of it. But it is a very difficult problem to solve by just selling a product and saying that once you buy this product, I would really love to have that product here right now. I could showcase it to you that if you buy this box and you deploy it in your systems, you plug it into your IoT and now it's fine. You know, there's a cost associated with it, just go and deploy it. It has to be more holistic thinking. You have to understand what is the business you are actually doing, how is it affecting everything, how are you handling the devices, how are you handling the cloud side, the connectivity, etc. Think about the whole big picture. What does it look like? Moving on. If we believe the number that I showed you earlier, saying that 10% of devices, absolutely based on nothing. If we believe that that's true, that 10% of devices out there right now would have a vulnerability that we can exploit, and we can somehow connect them to the Mirai botnet, abusing that vulnerability, then that would basically mean, given how many presentations we've had today and yesterday, that would basically mean that most likely at least one of those devices would fit into that category. Now, I haven't asked, so I don't know which one of you is the guilty one, but at least somebody should be feeling very guilty right now, thinking, oh, I'm actually within that 10% because we have so-and-so problem. And that basically highlights the problem here, that in order for this to work, and in order for it to be good for everybody, we don't necessarily know where the solution needs to be deployed, where it needs to happen, and how it needs to work. We just need to make sure that our devices, our business model, and what we are doing is happening okay, so we can ensure that our business is continuing. And then we can start thinking about how to protect our business from others. So this is something we are working on, and this is something I'm doing a lot of. And this is basically what keeps me awake at night. Thank you. And just one quick word. We have a very brief video to show you after this, just to give you some ideas about what security means in IoT and how we see it. But it's been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully you get some understanding and ideas and something to think about. If there's anything you want to discuss further, you can find us there. Feel free to come and talk about it. And if you happen to be within that 10%, definitely come there. We can help you. Thank you.